Okay, so everybody knows we're recording now. And allow you to screen share this when you're ready.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just let me know when you think everything's ready to start. I think what we should probably do is, and Steve will be here as soon as possible, is just looks like we've got is that Valerie?
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe just have Alyssa do just a quick overview, and Laura's on as well. So see if anyone that comes on has any questions or needs further clarification, and just feel better giving them something to start with.
Joe, would it be helpful if I put the plan, the map up while I'm talking?
I think so, Alyssa, yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I get it to a size that where we can see the full thing here. All right, let me do that first and make sure that that works. Can you see that?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Give me 1 second here to adjust my monitor so I can keep going. Okay, great. So I will give, I guess I'll first start off by saying hello, everyone, and good evening. I'll give a brief overview, a recap of the discussions that we've had to date regarding the development program draft that is being presented tonight at this public hearing, and the primary and perhaps most important terms that are contemplated therein, as a highlight for context to set the stage for the public hearing or any other discussion that we have this evening. So the map that's on the screen shows the downtown study area from the downtown revitalization plan, which ultimately has been or is being proposed, or a downtown TIF district, and that's a tax increment financing district. This is being proposed as what's known as an omnibus downtown tax increment financing district, and that term generally relates to the town's ability to provide credit enhancement agreements for projects potentially. That is an authorization that allows the town to do that. It's not necessarily a requirement. It's certainly not an obligation or a promise to any particular party. It's simply an element of the development district that allows the town to do that in the future if it decides that that's desirable to do so. In terms of this area that's shown on the map and the development program, the acreage is 677.97 acres. That's included in this proposed TIF district. The term of the district would be for a length of 30 years. It would begin July 1 of 2021, and it would go through June 30th of 2051. The original assessed value, which is the base value of the TIF district, on which all new value would be captured, is $110,075,400. That value is designated as of March 31st, 2020 by Maine statute. And in a couple of different models, as we've talked in the past few meetings, the town, both through its assessor and through its consultant, Daryl, have estimated an increased, meaning a new potential assessed value for this district to be approximately $17 million. And the projections, tax revenue projections and tax shift projections that have been calculated have been based on this estimate of potential new value. And so what the TIF district will do is capture the new potential new value of $17 million to the or any amount that actually occurs at 100%. And it will allow the town to designate and dedicate the tax revenue from that new value toward identified authorized project costs, which we'll talk about here. That's in a really brief nutshell the purpose of the TIF district and what is being proposed in front of you this evening. So the capture, as I said, would be 100% of the tax revenue that is generated on the new value, which again is currently estimated at 17 million, but at the end of the day, it would be whatever actual new value exists in any given tax year would be the tax revenue on that value would be captured at 100% as proposed. Based on the estimate of 17 million, that would generate an average of $216,365 in TIF revenue each year of the district. So over a term of 30 years, that would be just under $6.5 million in tax increment financing revenue. So again, that's tax revenue that is generated on new value that is then captured by the town for designated project costs that are being authorized in the development program. The tax shifts, as we refer to them, are shown in the development program. Those are the impacts to the municipality on state revenue sharing, state aid to education, and county tax, whether this value is in fact created and is not captured in a TIF district, or whether this value is in fact created and is captured in a TIF district. If the estimated value of $17 million in new assessed value in fact occurs and is not captured in a TIF district, the net new tax to the town would be estimated to be $132,960 per year over the 30-year district of the, or excuse me, over the 30-year term of the proposed district. That's just shy of $4 million total. And then lastly, as we talk about the tax revenue and the potential capture of tax revenue, the uses of TIF revenue are set forth in the development program and in table number 1, and you can see that if you have the development program that starts on page 6 of the draft. This table sets forth the town's authorization to spend TIF revenues. And so this entire program, including the designation of the district in terms of the boundaries that you see here on the map, the acreage, the term of the district, the original assessed value, the capture at 100%, and then the uses of the TIF revenue would all be authorized by the town, both by the board at this meeting tonight, if it so chooses, and then at a referendum vote by town meeting. This then creates the development program document, which is adopted by the town and goes to the State of Maine Department of Economic and Community Development to be finally approved as consistent with Maine statute. That is the governing document for the TIF district going forward, and it establishes the town's authority to operate the TIF district going forward, including the expenditure of TIF revenue consistent with the project cost table that is set forth in this development program. So that's a high-level overview of what the TIF district is, what the development program is proposing to date. And then maybe I'll pause there if there are any questions, but then we can talk about next steps in terms of process that's required for adopting a TIF district.
Any questions for Alyssa? Mark, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if this is the best time to bring it up, but I had two major concerns with this, and the first one was the 100% capture, and you addressed that. I think the best interest of the townspeople in section 3.04 on page bottom of page 8 and the top of page 9, where it says that that will be voted on annually. And I think that's the way to go. And but uses to be allowed by the Board of Selectmen, I feel that it would be in the townspeople's best interest if they got a chance to vote on that. At the same time, they voted for the percent of capture. These projects are going to have enough lead time. I don't see any problem with providing the information and let the people in town vote which project they think has the highest priority and should move forward. And I'd like to see language in that document that allowed that.
Madam Chair, I think probably Alyssa may be the best person, or Daryl, to field that question.
Yeah, any comments? Because I think as it stands in this document, the Board of Selectmen only holds authority to approve TIF funded projects. And Mark, is that what your?
Yes, I believe the townspeople should vote on it.
And perhaps there, you know, if either of you could comment from, you know, either your experience with prior towns, or maybe there's a threshold of, you know, or a town's purchasing policy that tends to be followed with certain projects that are funded that are at, you know, say 10,000 and above or 20,000 and above. Any comments?
Sure, I'll comment on my experience with the development program. Tends to be the document that gets put before the voters to give the Board of Selectmen the authority on as to and/or limitations as to how to spend TIF revenues, so that is not part of a budget process annually. It doesn't have to be the case. It's certainly it's a policy decision as to whether you want to create, and many municipalities do also create a TIF policy as to how, which could include designation of TIF districts, authorization of credit enhancement agreements, any sort of parameters on either of those, as well as uses of TIF revenues, which have to be in line with the development program itself, because that is really establishing what you intend to and are authorized to spend TIF revenues from this district on. So that in and of itself, this table that we've referenced is sort of setting some parameters for you. But if the town wishes as a matter of policy to craft some additional restrictions or regulations to guide the board's decision year to year, you can do that in a different document. That would not be part of the development program, and it would not need to go to DECD for approval, though DECD loves to see those as just sort of a matter of record or to keep on file with these applications if you do adopt one.
In my experience with various TIFs, we've always had the authority, the way Alyssa explained, with the development program, the development plan, the select board and common councils have that authority. And the reason for that, when you're doing credit enhancement agreements and other types of things, if you have to go back to a special town meeting or an annual town meeting every time, that just sort of slows the whole process down, especially when you're trying to do the public and private projects. And therefore, I like it the way that we have it set up now. But again, it is a local policy decision with that. That's just based on the 7 or 8 TIFs I've been involved with. All of them have done it this way. There was one community, I believe it was Topsom, that tried to do it with annual meetings and those kinds of things. And then they reverted back to giving the select board the authority.
Okay, I don't have any issues with the district, with the list of projects, or the nuts and bolts of it after the project is approved. I just think that, you know, you're going to have the Economic Development Council, the town manager, the Board of Selectmen, you know, figuring out what they think is best for the town. And I just believe, you know, because there's going to be millions of dollars in this account, and let the selectmen just, and it's really taxpayer money, you know, so I believe that a broad range of taxpayers should have a chance to vote on that project, not get too involved and slow the thing down or anything, but just have the say on which projects are gonna go forward at that time. And then leave the rest of the document, rather than make a separate document, policy thing, you know, I don't see why it just wouldn't be incorporated into this.
So Alyssa, just, I mean, first of all, any questions from the board at this point? Not yet. So Alyssa, regarding this development program that we have here, if there are changes that we want to have made to it, how does that happen? I mean, or if the board does decide after discussing this that, you know, well, maybe at a certain monetary limit, we do want a different policy. Does that need to be referenced here in the development program?
So there are two ways to accomplish it. If the board simply wants to adopt a policy that will govern expenditure of TIF revenues within the parameters of the development program as presented and as finally adopted, it can do that at any time on its own without needing to do anything in the development program. The other way to achieve that would be to actually put those provisions, whatever they end up being as a policy decision, in the development program document you have before you. You can do that. If you do that, whether it's this issue or any issue, if there are any substantive changes to the development program as a result of the meeting tonight, then we will need to hold another public hearing on the development program as amended. And the statute requires that there be 10 days, a minimum of 10-day public notice of that. So that's really just a timing issue to coordinate to be sure that we can still stay on track with respect to having the warrant approved and then ultimately forwarding this to town meeting in March. And although March feels far away, approving the warrant and getting ballots printed for March, we're actually probably approaching the window is probably closing in order to meet those timelines to move this forward for March. So any revisions would need to very quickly be turned around, and we'd have to look at the calendar to see if we can meet another 10-day notice for another public hearing.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I noticed in reading documents that the authorization of the TIF district and the authorization of the development plan, two issues, and they're often voted on simultaneously, but they don't have to be. And so it also says in the documents that, you know, at this public hearing, you know, they're going to give due consideration to any pertinent issues that are brought up. And so I'm pros TIF. This has a good head of steam. I'd like to see it go forward. I'm not trying to gum up the works, but I'm just trying to have the general taxpayer protected, you know, a broader range of votes available to move the project ahead rather than, you know, 5 people. And because, like I say, there's millions of dollars. And I would, if there's a speedy way to, you know, just make an amendment, I'd be all for it.
Well, I think Alyssa said that if there could be a separate policy drafted that is apart from the development program, so we would not need to, you know, if that's something the board, you know, chooses to do. Is that correct, Alyssa?
You could create a TIF policy that's not tied to any particular development program, but that governs the town's use of TIF revenues. And that doesn't have to be a part of the development program. So it doesn't need to be adopted with this process. It can be done at a later date or, you know, once you designate this district.
Ethan, did you have something?
I was just going to say in regards to Mark's comments about the taxpayers having a fair shake at this, the taxpayers elected to find West, yes? Yes?
Yeah.
And the taxpayers going to vote whether to put this program in, right?
Correct.
Okay, so they can decide then whether we want to do it, whether we want to adopt this or not. And as far as drafting the policy after the fact, if we can do that, I hate things getting held up and
Yeah,
Drafted and this and that.
that's a good point. Valerie, did I see your hand up? Did you want to speak? Are you muted or?
Yes, okay.
Go ahead, Donna.
My only question, I don't know if it's now or not, but they showed the TIF district and they pointed out like churches and things that are nonprofits. Are nonprofits excluded because they don't pay taxes, or are they still included for the purpose? Because the main reason I'm here at this meeting is because I think Daryl at a previous meeting a long time ago said something about there would be potentially grants that could be applied for through the TIF district. And so that's why I'm sort of here listening. And I want to make sure, first of all, I'm not excluded as a nonprofit for the RFA. And then secondly, are there grants associated with this in any way, shape, or form?
I'd be happy to address that.
Please do,
And
Daryl.
as you know, with a downtown, it's a combination of residential, businesses, churches, government, libraries, post offices, it's the whole menu down there. And in our development program, Valerie, and in the table 1, there's some activities that talk about, just everything from facade programs, streetscapes, and, infrastructure and parking and all of that. But incentives to developers for commercial projects, but also in the program piece where we talk about things that are going to be the arts and recreational and those kinds of things that is Rangeley's character, so to speak. So there could be different types of activities that could occur for potential grants. And that could happen a number of ways. One is TIF funds could be used as a match or leverage to get additional grants for public-private partnership projects. There could be some things to deal with blighted properties that need a little help, and also for certain organizations that are providing arts and cultural, the fact that they can provide revenue generation, whether it's a arts or entertainment place. There's ways to do specific grants and tie it into TIF. And I've done those things with other communities, Fort Kent, Richmond, and so forth, and Wilton. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yes, we were sort of interested in the facade part.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the key elements of the TIF program, when you're doing downtown TIFs, is to eliminate or help, alleviate slum and blight or blighted conditions, and also that creates a vibrant downtown by the way the buildings look and the property. So that would be one of the key points to this particular TIF, is to do a facades program.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before Alyssa moves on to the next steps? Mark?
This is Alyssa, and I was just curious where this public hearing is going to be concluded, and the selectmen are going to open a regular selectmen's meeting and vote on consent items, one of which would be adopting the development program. Could they have a legal vote to adopt the development program containing an amendment to allow the projects to be voted on at town meeting?
Yes, so they can vote to adopt the development program as amended. However, my opinion is still that another public hearing has to happen on the development program as amended. That's been my consistent practice, that any floor amendments that are substantive in nature to the key terms of the development program, and authorization for expenditures is one of those, in my opinion. That as a matter of public process, it's appropriate to put that revision out to the public notice again and have another public hearing on the development program with that amendment, so that the public has an opportunity to comment on the program with that change included.
And Mark, what makes this a little tricky doing that is we have to have warrant article language prepared right around December 14th through the 17th. And so that at the December 21st the Board of Selectmen approve the warrant for the March 9th. Otherwise, we miss that window and we would lose capturing the April 1st, 2019 through March 31st original assessed value. I like what Alyssa and I think Cindy mentioned too, is you can set your own policy. Rangeley can have its own TIF policy on expenditures separate from the development program that we're talking about at tonight's public hearing. The same way when we take certain specifics like the facade program that Valerie was interested in, I've developed those policy guidelines for how to conduct and do a facade program and at what levels. And then, so I think the way to maybe make you feel more at ease, Mark, is if we can, move this process forward with the development program, but then between all of us involved is come up with a policy between now and say March, and then we can have our local Rangeley TIF policy for the expenditures that sort of match up with the development program as far as the oversight and the decision authority piece.
Yeah, Daryl, that's, I appreciate that, and if that were to happen, I'd be okay with that. It bothers me a little bit that, this public hearing, it could be misinterpreted to be a public hearing just so you can check the box that you had it, that you're not actually looking to change anything that's being presented based on public comment. And, I think that's unfortunate, but like I said, I'd like to see this thing continue moving along. And, but I do want to make sure the broad range of taxpayers is selected. And with all respect to Ethan's comment about the 5 selectmen being elected, that's true. But I've been around long enough to see enough boards in small towns that the composition of all of them don't always work in the best interest of the general public. And so that's why I thought if there was some language in here that gave the taxpayers more say on multi-million-dollar projects, it would be a better thing.
And I think one of the things, Mark, all this good feedback is important in these meetings, because I've never done a public hearing where I just wanted to tick a box. I really feel it's good to have this public dialogue and input. But one of the things that will be reflected in the minutes from this public hearing are some of the comments in the minutes would show that the town is desirous of setting a local TIF policy on these things. So I think that way all of us are covered, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on that in that I appreciate Mark's concerns, but if it is a multi-million-dollar project, I feel like the public is going to be voting on that project anyway, because the TIF money is not going to pay completely for a multi-million-dollar project. Funds are going to be having to come from elsewhere. So I feel like there would be enough areas where the public is giving input on the item. And that you would just be deciding of that $2 million project, whatever, 20,000 is paid for by TIF funds. And yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Like anything you show?
So is it necessary that you have to have a policy, or could you actually create like a procedure? Like, so I don't want anything to hold up anything either. So basically, if something happens, we have a project and our focus is, for example, broadband. That's what we're looking at. Well, what happens if something happens at the sewer treatment plant, because we have all these houses coming in where we need to have an additional, what is it called? Infrastructure built for that, then that takes precedence over the lagoon. Thank you. The second lagoon, and that all of a sudden kicks up, and there are actually funds that are available. I just don't want, municipalities takes a long time to get stuff approved, other than for most of the part. And like Laura said, if something happens, we do have a project going, that TIF money is not going to be built up that fast where there's $1 million in it where we're using it for that particular project. So maybe if procedures are there, like for example of saying like, okay, so if we have a TIF project, this is what we do. We have so many public hearings and things like that as an introduction. so the public does have that option. So that's not affecting this, but we're doing our due diligence to make sure that the public does have a say in everything that we choose for. This is my view.
Yeah, I think that's well said, Shelley. And I think we have been trying our best because with the required public hearing of today, we also held those other TIF workshops. And we could still follow up with additional TIF informational workshops throughout this process.
And I think that's what we need to do. I mean, it's, you know, these, it would be different if we weren't in the world of COVID and people could just come into the school gym and you know, and ask questions and actually have all these pages in their hands. So I think it is our due diligence. And I think the board has talked about continuing the TIF education up to that March vote because it's just so easy for folks to miss it. So are there any other comments, you know, regarding section 1 before Alyssa goes on to the next steps? Seeing none, Alyssa, please go on to the next steps.
Sure, thank you. So we'll just outline from here the timeline and the action items required in order to move the development program and district forward. So this evening's meeting consists of the public hearing, which is occurring now. That's been duly noticed. We've got copies of the tear sheets of 3 publications actually, which is fantastic. And I'll just sort of reiterate the statutory requirements for the public hearing since it's contemplated that the board will at least consider a vote on adoption this evening as well. The statute requires the public hearing for the purpose of giving interested parties a reasonable opportunity to present testimony concerning the proposed TIF district and development program. And so that's what we've just done in terms of the conversation that's occurred. And then the only other requirement in the statute other than the 10-day notice and what I've just cited is a provision that if an interested party claims at the public hearing that the proposed TIF district or development program will result in a substantial detriment to that party's existing business in the town or produces substantial evidence to that effect, the legislative body must consider that evidence. And so that hasn't been presented yet. I mean, to the extent that it is, we can discuss what needs to happen there, but that's just a requirement of the statute for you to consider any type of evidence of that kind at a public hearing before moving forward with the district adoption and development program. So at the conclusion of this public hearing, the next action item would be, if the board desires, to consider an act on adopting both the district and the development program. That doesn't have to happen at the same time. For purposes of the timeline for the March meeting, it would be ideal to do that this evening to move it forward so that you can prepare the warrant accordingly. You have to consider any comments that are presented at the public hearing before actually adopting the development in the district. It does not necessarily mean that you have to change either one, but that is a requirement of the statute in terms of holding and considering the public hearing. And then the action item this evening would be for the board to adopt the order, which has been prepared for you and presented. It's included as Exhibit F in the development program, and there's also a standalone document that you might have. That includes all of the findings that the statute requires for adoption of a TIF district and a corresponding development program, chief among which is that the town determines that the proposed district and development program will contribute to the economic growth or well-being of the town or to the betterment of the health, welfare, or safety of the inhabitants of the town. So that finding is included in there. The procedural history of what's been proposed in terms of the district and development program are also included in the order, as well as a reference to the fact that the board is taking this action this evening and will be sending it for approval by the voters at a town meeting referendum. So it's contemplated that you're essentially step 1 in this process, and that the final designation by the town as an overall legislative body is not effective until the voters approve that in March. So all of that is in the order that you would adopt this evening if you desire to adopt the district and development program tonight. And then the next steps from there would be that we would prepare, I would prepare a draft for you of warrant article language for this item in particular, that would be before you on December 21st at your next regular meeting to approve along with the other warrant articles for the March 9th town meeting. And then early January, that warrant would go to the town clerk for printing. Early February, absentee ballots would be available, and then the town meeting vote would occur on March 9th. And presuming that the district is adopted and designated by the town following the town meeting vote, then the complete application would go to DECD. And I'll note that the materials that have been provided as of this public hearing are the materials that would go to DECD. And so we have worked to make sure that we have a complete application prepared that will not change between now and a vote on March 9th. And that's an important step that is something we always strive to do prior to a public hearing so that the public has the opportunity to review the application that ultimately gets submitted to the state prior to coming into a public hearing to comment on it, which is again why any amendments I think really need to be noticed and provided to the public as well so that public hearings can occur. So that is where we're at tonight in terms of the vote and the next steps, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions from the board? Mark? Valerie, Laura, any questions at all? Okay,
Not here.
all right. Alyssa, it looks like you've done your part. All right, if there is nothing further, that takes care of the agenda items on the public hearing. So if there's no further comment, then we will call this public hearing to a close. No other comments? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Thank you all. I'll hand it over to Steve. We'll go into our.
You join me for a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Short moment of silence for men and women in uniform and those that are fighting the pandemic. Thank you. Call the meeting to order at 20 minutes to 6 for our selectmen's meeting here. We'll talk about TIF. Need any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
In front of us is Exhibit F, orders of the Board of Selectmen designating the Rangeley and Aquasic Village Downtown Tax Increment Financing District and adopting the development of the program for said district. Cindy, thank you for taking care of the public hearing. Apologize for not getting here earlier. I've been stuck in Phillips. Better for my axles.
I let them know.
Thank you all, Daryl and Alyssa, for everything. Comments before I entertain the motion? Anything?
I mean, basically, Steve, what was discussed, maybe what you had missed was just some discussion on how to obtain voter input on perhaps some of these larger TIF projects. And it certainly is a policy that can be developed afterwards. I mean, also, there's no need to change the development program at this point without setting everything back. But as Alyssa pointed out, we do need to take public comment seriously, and that probably is a future discussion.
Well, obviously, the public input is a hard one with this COVID situation and not being able to fill a room. But thank you for those who took the time tonight to come in and be part of the Zoom aspect of this thing. And Mark, obviously, thank you for being here. Any other comments before we entertain a motion? No?
I think they should put something out to make it so people know if they vote no, I'm all for it. I mean, I bet 9% of people can't figure this out. I don't know if there's some paper you could put out one page or simple.
Well, we've been doing, it's been public hearings this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
We've been encouraging everybody to Zoom in.
Right.
I think Mark made a statement a few minutes ago. We've been around a long time. and seen all sorts of different things. Well, we've all been around a long time, and sometimes people take an opportunity to get educated, and others expect us to take that lead.
I think I agree with Joe that the education should probably continue. And I know that Tracy there has been a one-page summary that's been put in the newspaper, that's on the website. But I agree. I think that until that March 9th vote, I think
If
it's.
you want to pass, then get people educated. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm all for it. I bet the 9% of people in the school, how that's all work.
It's a lot to take.
A lot like the school budget.
Yeah.
90% of the people don't follow that either, or even look at it. No, but you're right. It's a dilemma we've been facing for years.
I really understand.
Good.
Yeah, I'm get Steve for that.
Anything else, Cindy?
No, that's it.
Make a motion. Motion to adopt?
Yeah,
Motion,
make a motion.
yeah, motion to
adopt it.
adopt.
I'll second that one. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor to adopt? Thank you. Anything else you have for us, Joe? Anybody else in the board of selectmen?
No,
How about from the press?
Is there any way to put like in the paper where Mark is now representing us as the press? Is there something, Daryl, that you could get that has like a highlight, not very long, not very, like what the benefits are and something like that?
Yep, we did an initial press release and we'll follow up with a little bit more color of, what the benefits are. Yep.
You mean like tip and layman's term?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Cliff notes. Right.
Tip for dummies.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep, right. Okay, if there's nothing else, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second in favor? Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Mark, not